Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Addiction. Yes, I have my hat on backwards again. Haven't had time to take a shower from the gym, but hell, that's okay. I'm down with it. And so is our guest, thank goodness. Hey, we got a really good show for you guys today. I want to introduce you to Kerri Lewis. Kerri Lewis is a recovering coach working with people who are addicted to substance or to ideas like perfection and success. And I've known some people like that. Matter of fact, I've probably been one of them at one time in my life. When you work with this lady, I'll tell you what, she's going to gut you like a fish, and she will help you live your life for you to control your life, not no one else, without fear and on your own terms. And that's what I love. She, oh my gosh, I'm just losing things here. She will help you free yourself from the fear that a lot of us struggle from. So I want to introduce you to Kerri Lewis. She is a badass with a huge heart. Kerri, how are you today?
Oh, first off, I am a badass with a huge heart. And secondly, it is such an honor and a privilege to be here digging into guilt and shame, which is super important to touch upon, particularly when it comes to addiction. And really, I'm just excited to have a conversation with you. I love your energy, and I think showers are overrated.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be with us. And before I forget, I want to say thank you to Darcy for introducing this. Darcy, thank you so much for this connection. Kerri and I, we had a conversation. I don't know, we had a Zoom call 2, 3 weeks ago. I don't remember. Time flies by so quick. And I think we were on the call for 40 plus minutes. We just hit it off and we were laughing and joking and just getting in some really serious stuff. And immediately, I mean, Kerri's part of my family now, as far as I'm concerned, and that's again what I love about doing this show. So, my gosh, Kerri, you have lived one hell of a life. I mean, seriously, when you and I spoke quite a few weeks ago, you told me that you have been on your own, literally been on your own since age 14. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's interesting. I'm one of six kids. And while I had a home to go to, so I want to preface that, there wasn't community, there wasn't connection, and there was a lot of mental health issues. And so I really felt like I was on my own for most of my life. It's just at 14, I was no longer willing to live within the confines of the emotional abuse and the unpredictability and really the isolation that I felt in that home within my family. And so yeah, that's when I kind of went in and fell into, you know, leaning in to try to find love.
With you being an addiction coach and transformational coach, I bet you see that all the time, right? Aren't the majority of us searching for love, right? However, we cannot find the love we're searching for unless we find it within ourselves first.
Yes. And I mean that's it, right? Right before you hit record, we were talking about love because I truly believe, as I mentioned, when you break through all of the emotions and the narratives and the belief systems, we operate from one of two emotions, one of two places, and that's deep-seated fear or deep-seated love. And you aren't ever going to be able to tap into that literally unconditional and expansive love until you're able to love yourself fully, for sure. And but we're not taught that, and so we're constantly chasing the next thing to numb out our suffering. So for me, it was addiction to sex and drugs as a teenager, and then later on in life it was addiction to success and to alcohol, shopping, really anything and everything to fill that void of feeling unworthy, unlovable, not good enough. Really, I just didn't ever want to feel those emotions, but they were deeply seated in my subconscious. And so the only way to get relief from them was to not feel them at all. the problem is, right, we numb out and then they come back tenfold because they never go away. They're just covered.
Yeah. And then we never get that same feeling the first time, that first time feeling of numbing out, right?
Yep.
I mean, this is kind of a crazy way to say it, but I believe it's spot on. It's like the first time you do have sex, right? It's like, oh my heck. And then, I mean, you still have those feelings, but it's not that same feeling. It's not that same high. And so many of my guests have talked about that too, right? It's like they're constantly chasing that high. My wife was constantly chasing her alcoholism, or that feeling of forgetting everything. And she drank so fast that it ended up just knocking her right on her butt because she was always chasing that same feeling that we never get back.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that goes to biology, right? So I'm pretty I have a general knowledge of how our brain works, right? And when we numb out to anything, it can be food, it can be a substance, it can be shopping, we get an instantaneous dopamine hit. But our body is constantly fighting to be in homeostasis. So once that dopamine hit comes, now our body's going to flood us with adrenaline, norepinephrine, all of these counteracting chemicals, which then result in feelings of anxiety, of angst, depression, right? Because it's simply trying to get us into homeostasis. So we're constantly fighting. Our body is simply doing its job by fighting to get us back to, you know, center. And we are making these choices that are like, okay, dopamine hit, let's get bam. And then it swings so far to the right, then you need twice as much, three times as much, four times as much. And you see that continual perpetual cycle.
Wow. Now, when you said you took off at age 14 to go really search for the love, falling into the addiction, and you left a pretty troubled home from what you said. For the majority of the people, and I could be mistaken, but I believe it was the same for you. You fall back in those same type of circumstances without even realizing you're putting your foot right back in it, right? You're pulling yourself away from the one, but that's what you know, and you're actually finding yourself back in the same place.
Right. That's like anything. It's so funny. We grow up with alcoholic parents and we're like, well, I'm not gonna drink, but we fall back into that behavior. We grow up with abusive, physically abusive parents and we promise we're never gonna hit our kids. But if we don't um invest in learning and getting curious and being open-minded to different behaviors and ways of thinking, then we are inherently going to fall back into that same pattern of behavior. On the other hand, I have absolutely met people who come from really challenging homes who don't actually lean into that behavior, but they still struggle mentally because now they're on the opposite side where they're striving for perfectionism, they're striving or seeking something so that way they never fall into the behaviors that they experienced as a kid. And so that's why I encourage people all of the time to take a deep dive into curiosity and what fills them up and what makes them happy, because you're never really going to know peace, right? You're never going to know self-love if you're constantly operating from a place of avoiding where it is you come from or behaviors that you're used to, or numbing out, basically, which most people do because they don't know another way.
Yeah. And that's so hard for us as individuals. I feel, when I did a talk at the Healing Utah Success Summit this past April, that was something I brought up about fear, right? I am a firm believer, and this is just my belief, and I'm pretty sure your belief is the same way. When something scares the living shit out of you, in my eyes, you face it head on. Because
Yep.
that's the direction you're literally supposed to go, right? I mean, we're born with the fear, right? We have that. What is it? Fear and falling, I think, are two of the things that we are actually born with, and then we just seem to enhance it as we grow and society gets a hold of us and we see how things go. I mean, yeah, I really do believe that when you have that fear, that's your flag to go, boom, I'm gonna go for it.
Yep. Yeah, and you know what? So it's interesting. So I boxed for several years, and I actually tattooed on my arm, "Feel the fear and do it anyway." Because one of my methods of working with people is visuals. Because, you know, if we're in fight or flight, our emotional response system's kicked in. Our logical part of our brain is not active because it slows down in response. So you want to be able to find tools and strategies to pull you back, and one of those is visuals. So when we're talking about fear, I 100% agree. When we move through anything that causes us fear, and it can simply be having a conversation with a new person, trying out for a job, or, you know, for me, a big thing I talk about is having tough conversations and speaking your authentic truth. When you move through that, you start to build self confidence and your own ability to show up for yourself, right? And when you're talking about how we have fear ingrained from us, which we do because humans wouldn't have survived if we didn't have fear. But now we have the ability that we don't need to be in fight or flight. We don't need to be in survival mode at all times. So we have the ability to rewire our brain. And part of doing that is rewiring our subconscious processing, right? And the way to do that is just like you said, face your fears head on. And, you know, don't judge yourself for the fears. That's the other part. You know, when we talked about guilt and shame, most people operate from guilt and shame, but a lot of that guilt and shame is purely judgment of themselves for even having a thought. Like, for example, I shared with somebody the other day. I looked at somebody and I immediately had a judgment about their weight. And in previous times in my life, I would have judged myself. Oh my God, Kerri, you are a horrible person. How dare you? That's not nice. It's unkind. Well, no, the reality is that society has perpetuated this ideal within our belief system. And it's not that I believe it, but that is the instinct that I went to because that is what I've been um, kind of conditioned to see. And so rather than judge myself for having that thought, I was like, okay, wow, that's interesting that I'm still challenged with that belief system that doesn't feel good for me, but it's so predominant that it's what I first came up with. So I was able to come from a place of, you know, curiosity rather than judging myself, rather than condemning myself. I asked myself, well, why is it I thought that thought in the first place? Am I inherently a bad person? No, I'm one of the kindest people I know. But based on everything that we are exposed to, and I am very, very particular about what I allow my brain to be exposed to because it really is programming. Everything's programming at all times. I give myself grace and I recognize this is simply an old pattern of belief that is still ingrained in my subconscious. And each time I do have a thought like that, I have an opportunity to rewire my thinking, not from judging myself, but getting curious and breaking down the reasons why I had that thought in the first place.
Yeah, and that is so true, right? I think we have something like 7 billion neurons in our brain. And it's like my friend Nicholas T. Smith from A Tribe of Giants, just a phenomenal man, good friend of mine. He talks about it, says it's easy, however, it still takes work, like what you're saying, Kerri. All we have to do is unplug it. You know, it's
Yep.
just like if you plug a vacuum in an outlet that's loose, right? And the vacuum's on, then it's off, then it's on, and then it's off. All you have to do is unplug that sucker, go
Yep.
find one that's fits better, right? And plug it back in. And again, it takes that training, it takes that time, but as you start recognizing your thoughts a little bit more, and one of I think it was one of your YouTube videos or something, it's talking about the baby steps, right?
Yes.
You do not, I think that's why a lot of people give up. They go to do something different and their heart is all into it. They really want to do it. Their mind's focused, but they feel like they have to take these giant steps and it's not going to happen.
Yep.
People who fall into addiction, you just don't jump out of bed one day and go, I'm going to be a heroin addict. Here we go. You know,
Yep.
it's those baby steps to get you to where all of a sudden you're realizing, oh my gosh, my life is unmanageable. I don't know what to do with my life anymore, and I've lost everything. It's the same when you're going for something, right? Taking those baby steps, you have to work yourself to it. I mean, I love hiking, and I love going up in the mountains, our beautiful Wasatch Mountains, and take off on a hike. And there's times I know exactly where I'm going. I know how far I got to hike to get there. Well, I don't do it by taking three big, huge steps. I have to take little teeny tiny steps and sometimes climb over boulders and go through trees and cross streams to get to where I want to go. And it's the same way with where we want to go in life.
Yeah. Yeah, you're spot on, and I speak about that a lot. Because think about it, right? Why do you think that the fitness industry is so good, or the weight loss industry is multi-billion dollars, right?
Yeah.
Because people want, they jump in, they go hard, they put all this expectation on themselves, and what they fail to realize is, one, if you haven't worked on the narrative as to why it is you struggle with weight in the first place, or anything, it doesn't even have to be weight, you're inevitably going to self-sabotage unconsciously. This has nothing to do with conscious. Your unconscious is going to make it, because what you do is you hit a certain point in your brain, and your brain is like, you can't do this, and it's going to find a way to bring you back down. So you'll get in a car accident, you'll get called to do work. People don't realize that nothing is coincidence. And so taking huge, massive action right away isn't going to be long lasting unless you're an outlier. There are some people who do it, but it's not the common denominator, because your subconscious is going to be like, no, this isn't you. So you're going to find a way to self-sabotage. So by taking small steps, and the more important part, so it's taking action, but it's celebrating that action, because what you're doing is now you're training your subconscious that you're worthy of that action, right? So for years and years, I truly believed I was dog shit. Like, I did not understand why I existed in this world. I believed I was unlivable. I believed I was bad. So if I tried to sit here and affirm, oh, I'm a great person, right? That I could feel the resistance. I'm like, this is crap. You know what I mean? But if I made sure that every morning I drank a glass of water, that's all I did. Drank a glass of water and then celebrated. Kerri, you showed up for yourself and was kind for yourself to yourself by drinking water, right? Now I'm slowly rewiring my subconscious to believe that I'm worthy of drinking that water, which is then going to start to believe, okay, maybe I'm worthy of going for walks every day. So it really is taking those small incremental steps, and then celebrating yourself for that small choice every day, that can really create a 360-degree shift in the way in which you live and think, and help you overcome any addictive behavior, but even more importantly than that, suffering. To your point about small actions, I don't, unless my client is physically at risk due to their addiction, if they're having a health crisis, or, it is some immediate need, I don't encourage my clients to quit their addiction in the beginning of our work together, because what all that's going to do is make them suffer. And my job is to lift you up and empower you and make you see your intrinsic worth and value. And if all you're doing is sitting here in angst and suffering, that's going to be a really tough thing to do. But if I can start to teach you small changes in behavior and hold you accountable for taking those actions, then most importantly, I celebrate that person, they celebrate themselves. Now we're creating these tools and these strategies that are going to help them make different choices when they are struggling and would normally lead into, shopping or binge eating. They're going to be able to say, oh, but the last time I went for a walk in nature, I felt really good. So that's the thing I'm going to do today. Right.
Yeah. I love that you said that. We had a guest on our show a year and a half ago who battled a porn addiction. Three decades, 2 decades
Yeah.
of porn addiction. And he was on a business trip, and he decided, hey, I can't beat this. And while he was out of town, knew of a bridge and he was going to jump off this bridge, commit suicide. And he was talking to God before he's getting ready to do this, right?
Yep.
And all of a sudden this little voice kicked in his head and it said, "Wait a minute. You've gone 3 days." And even in the porn and the sex addiction, they still use it as like the terms of drinking or doing drugs, right? It's like, "You didn't use
Absolutely.
today." And he's like, "Oh my gosh, I've gone 3 days. I've gone 24 hours before. I've gone a week and a half." And he goes, right at that moment, he realized what we talk about, the guilt and the shame, that's what he was continuously doing to
Yep.
himself instead of celebrating the days that he didn't use. So once he started counting those days, even if there was something in between it, right?
Yep.
He was still adding days. And before he knew it, he had 6 months. Before he knew it, he had a year and a half. And he stopped beating himself up. That because that shame, right? I watched my wife go through this. She would be sober for 3 or 4 months. A lot of times just she was in recovery, right? And then she'd get out of recovery and she'd be okay for a little bit and then she'd fall back. And I didn't make it easier for her. I'm like, yeah, this is just a waste of time. Why do you keep going to recovery? Because this is a waste of time, right? Because I'm not understanding at that time.
Yep.
Instead of celebrating those times for her, with her, I could have made things so much better in her journey of recovery by doing that. A mistake we make as loved ones on the other side. And then also, I watched her continuously get back on that hamster wheel because she felt like she let me down again. So that guilt came. And as soon as she felt that guilt, she drank again, which turned around and fed more guilt because she
Yep.
drank again. And then she was ashamed of what she was doing. It just kept happening over and over and over. And like you just said, if we celebrated the little teeny tiny things, we jump off the hamster wheel for a little bit, but we find ourselves getting back on. Well, guess what? Celebrate that little time you jumped off that hamster wheel.
Yep.
And I guess I'm one of those that I don't. I think a lot of recovery centers, and again, this is just my thoughts, okay? And you guys can judge me how you want, but I believe a lot of recovery centers make a mistake by telling the people that come in, you will relapse. Because me, that's giving him that excuse. Because if something happens in life, they're like, well, they told me I'm going to relapse, so I'm going to relapse. However, if you don't say that and you work on them getting to love themselves like what you do for individuals, help them see the areas where they can celebrate. If even if they do happen to jump back and go relapse, again, this is just how I'm seeing and talk to other individuals who have done it. They get back on the recovery wagon very, very quickly. They don't have that long spurt again before they come back. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's well, so I mean, here's the thing. I even have so it's so funny because I heard, you even so I study, neurolinguistics as well. And so I listen to everything. And I truly believe that we are all exactly where we're meant to be in any given moment, right? My path to where I am now is what was necessary to help me be the person I am to show up in service to others. And you mentioned that gentleman talking to God. I truly believe, I don't care what it is. So, as I mentioned earlier, too, I study both science, quantum physics, energy work, and I also study theology because I believe that to really, really heal, you have to be able to lean into something greater than you. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be your kids, you're doing it for your kids, whatever, but you have to surrender to the fact that you can't do anything on your own, and you're not meant to. We're not meant to be isolated. We need connection, and we need that support. But with regard to you're gonna relapse, right? What I tell people is recovery in anything is nonlinear, and it's not nonlinear. There is no program or structured set of guidelines that's going to help anybody, because we are so individualized. And so I don't necessarily love the fact that they say that you're going to relapse again more. And I get the point, right? Because it's like, don't judge yourself, but
Mhm.
there are other ways to convey that message without kind of creating that expectation, right? Because a lot of people associate relapse with failure, and it's not. And this is the other approach I take. I celebrate people's relapses, because what did you learn from that relapse, right? So why did you relapse? Did you have a really tough day at work? Was your boss, speaking to you in a really disrespectful manner that you've never ever advocated for your needs before? So all you've ever done is numb out, instead of say, hey, you know what? That type of behavior isn't behavior that I'm willing to tolerate anymore, right? So getting very curious about what it is that triggered you to lean into that behavior, and then celebrating that rather than being judgmental about making the choice that you did, because each moment is an opportunity to, again, grow and expand, get curious. You and I you mentioned that you've been on this journey for 14 years. I've been on this journey since I was 14. A
Yeah.
lot of the knowledge that I acquired didn't become wisdom, didn't become ingrained and seeped into my physiology and my being until my 30s. That's a long, long time of knowing but not really feeling intrinsically. But it was each moment, each choice that I made, each uh, person who planted a seed that culminated into the expression of who I am today. And just like you said earlier, we're never going to stop expanding. We're never going to stop growing. For me personally, I spend a good 2 to 5 hours each day with myself, learning and growing and expanding before I ever show up in the world, because I am an addict, right? I have an addictive personality, and I want to be able to show up through the lens of complete love, complete non-judgment, and hold space for whatever it is I'm going to experience in any given day. The only way to do that is to first hold space for myself, right? And to really center into myself and source. I'm very, very spiritual. But again, I work with a lot of people who aren't, and that's okay too. I have, there's umpteen thousands of scientific evidence that speaks to the fact that we're all energy. And so I can meet people in a place of logic as well. But regardless, it's really showing up in service for yourself through non-judgment and curiosity. Like, I can't emphasize that enough. Rather than beating yourself up for eating the second donut, ask yourself why. First off, sugar is super highly addictive. Like, it is literally, bam, it's giving you a hit. So some of it is just the fact that you ate the sugar in the first place is inherently going to make it easier to go into the second. And then don't judge yourself. Then start to just get curious about whether sugar is the thing that you want to lean into. And if it's in the case of drinking, what precipitated you popping that bottle? Like, what was it? Was it nothing? And that you were just feeling anxious? And here's the thing. This is why I talk a lot about teaching people how to um, get comfortable in their body. Your emotions will present in physical symptoms in your body far before they ever hit your mind, where you can logically put context into them. So, getting curious about, are my shoulders tense? Do I have tightness in my chest? Is my foot shaking? Why is it shaking? What am I feeling? And then just getting really interested in it, rather than, oh, I'm sitting here amongst a group of people and I shouldn't be nervous because they're my family and I'm just stupid and I'm ridiculous. And that's what most people do. They immediately go to judge themselves for what they're feeling.
Yeah, you're so right. It's crazy. And I've also found too, a lot of people, and you touched on it just briefly earlier, a lot of people who are judging other people, we're really judging ourselves, right? Because we're making
Always.
ourselves feel better, right? We're making ourselves feel better by judging someone else, because we want to look at ourselves more superior, right,
Yep.
than another individual. And I've even talked about this quite a few times. people cannot help who they are as individuals. You don't know what their life is, right? There are people who have been born with disabilities and without arms or legs or just deformed, that's how they were born. It's not their fault. If they chose to look that way, I doubt it, right? Now, I guess it's said in the religion, some religions, that we choose who our parents are going to be and what our life's going to be before we come here. I don't know if I'm quite in with that yet or not. I haven't really touched on it quite a bit. But we do. We like to throw stuff at other people when really we are the ones we need to look at in the mirror.
Yeah.
I did a simple little test. I went to a class, a gentleman that is a coach, and he had homework for us. And he had these 7 or 8 affirmations that he wanted us to memorize. And every single day, as many times as we could in a day, look at ourselves in the mirror and say these affirmations. And it's things like, I am wonderful, I am amazing, or I am this. The I am, those are 2 very powerful words, because the words that follow I am follow you. I'm like, I got this. This is a piece of cake, right? My ego was up here.
I bet it
Piece of
wasn't.
cake. I start doing it, and it took me, Kerri, literally the 3rd day. And I realized every time I went to say that, I looked away and then I looked back. And I was always looking to my left, not my right, always looking to my left. It took me 3 days and I went, oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
am not even where I thought I was at. Right? Because I didn't believe it. That's why I wasn't looking myself in the eye, because
Of
I
course.
didn't believe it.
Yeah. Mirror work is some of the toughest work that people can do, because you really, I mean, you're standing there with your soul, right? Outside of this body. And of course, when you're talking, particularly as a woman, right? I mean, the expectations to look a certain way in America are so great. I mean, most people can never compare. And so when I work with both men and women, but women predominantly, they really struggle with being able to look at themselves and love themselves, you know what I mean? And and really recognize their intrinsic worth. For me, I had the same struggle. It took me a really long time think about this. I love when I give people a compliment and they're like, oh, yeah, yeah, or they defer it, right? That speaks volumes to the fact that they're deflecting. They can't really receive that. When you give me a compliment, I'm like, thank you. I really appreciate that, because I'm comfortable with that, you know? And it's interesting. I don't need compliments. I really don't. Like, if I have grown to a place where I hope that I'm of service to you, but if I'm not, that's okay too. My job is simply to be present and love, and however that lands with you, I'm okay with, because I'm not meant for everybody. And the people I'm meant for I will be, I will
You'll attract, right? You'll
and
attract them
or
into your
learn.
life.
Yes. Yeah. But and that's why affirmations are interesting. When I'm working with people, I'll have them sit there when I'm about to have a talk. Before I teach communication course or something, I'll have people get quiet, and I'll say things like, "You are worthy of growing and expanding." That's not even you're worthy of love, or you are love, right? That's very, and most people have a visceral reaction. And I tell them, don't judge yourself for it. Just get curious, because the minute you recognize that you have that reaction, now you have created the slightest bit of awareness that you can get curious and look at why, and then get interested. But again, we've been so conditioned. And so, to get back to something you said about some religions say we pick and choose our parents and stuff, this is what I truly believe, right? We as humans are here to grow and expand, right? Whatever that looks like. And each of us, that journey is going to be different. And whether we chose it before we came into this experience or not, we are meant to grow and expand. The issue is that we also are part of a collective consciousness, right? So energy, it's proven energy does not dissipate. So energy from medieval times, 70 years ago to now, we're tapped into all that narrative. And when we as humans survive based on fear, it is it makes common sense why more often than not we lean into those fear narratives, just because that's the energy that has been most pervasive over the course of human experience. And that is why I tell people all the time, you got to take action every day. It's not, recovery or or showing up and living fully is sometimes it's a moment by moment choice. What are you going to do in this moment? And oftentimes it's being able to nurture yourself. I tell people all the time, you got to feel your feelings. So if I'm at a restaurant randomly with my significant other and I cry for 2 minutes, he gets it, because I'm not going to stuff down while I'm crying. And more often than not, I have no flipping idea why I was overcome with an emotion. But because I honor that emotion in that moment, I move through it like this. So most people, if you asked, a control group who's around me, what's Kerri's disposition, it's very joyful, it's incredibly joyful. But that's because I have no pent up built up energy of emotions I didn't allow myself to express. It comes, it goes, I move on. I don't even always have to know why I'm feeling that feeling, I just allow it. And I think that's the other issue. We are taught as a society, we got to suck it up, we got to keep it going, we got to move through it. That we have emotions for a specific reason. There's a
Yes.
reason. And if you think about it, right, I forget where I read it, but it made so much sense. This gentleman observed two ducks. They got into an altercation. As soon as they got into the altercation and dispersed, both ducks shook their feathers tremendously. Why? Because they're releasing that built up negative energy. And then they go around floating and happy and go lucky. That's what we need to do as individuals. And when we can really give ourselves permission, and just like I said before this interview, I show up fully. I'm obsessed with skulls. My logo skulls. I'm covered in tattoos. Generally speaking, I swear like a trucker. It's because I am so comfortable with showing up in any given moment as who I am. And in doing that, I really do free myself from that suffering, that anxiety, that depression. But of course, I do want your audience to hear, it took me many, many years. It takes me consistent practice. One thing we hear a lot of is discipline. And I hated that word because I lived with a father who scared the living crap out of me, right? So discipline, I immediately have this negative connotation to discipline. It's bad, it's yucky. But what I realized is discipline is simply devotion to self. Discipline is showing up in service to yourself. And when you can show up consistently in service to yourself, you inherently are in service to others. Because if I love myself, I have no reason to try to put you down. If I love myself, I have no reason to compete with you as another coach, because I'm confident that who I'm meant to serve, I'll serve. And if I find somebody that you could be of service to in a more meaningful way, I'm like, send that person there. But if we are so disconnected with ourselves, we can't do that. And the way to get connected with yourself is creating routines to learn yourself and staying true to that, even in the uncomfortableness of it. Because we all know getting sober from any addiction, whether it's perfectionism and titles to alcohol and substances, you got to go through the icky sticky middle, and that can be really painful, really arduous, and very, very trying for sure.
Yeah. You know, you and I must have read that same book, because I remember reading that same thing. It was a guy sitting on a park bench watching these
Yeah.
ducks. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that same thing. And I want to elaborate a little bit on what you said, Kerri. It is okay for us to feel our emotions, right? We talked about the guilt and the shame. There are things that's going to happen in our life, the rest of our lives, where those things are going to come up, right? We may feel guilty about making a comment about someone and then realize that we made that comment. You said it earlier. God has given us all these emotions. We are meant to feel these emotions. So allow yourself to feel what you need to feel. However, don't freaking stay there. You
Yes.
know, don't stand in the mud because I don't know how many people. I'm pretty sure a lot of people know what happens to water in the mountains if it stays, or even in the valley if it stays in one place for too long. It gets stagnant, right? It
Yep.
stinks. Stuff starts growing in it. Mosquitoes start, flies start coming. That's what happens with us, with our minds and our bodies when we stay stuck in that. We become stagnant, and all this other nasty crap comes in. Feel the emotions, allow those emotions to go through whatever process they need to go through, then move on.
Yep.
You know, and
And go
oh,
ahead.
go,
Sorry.
oh, I was just going to say a good example is, you know, we moved this past weekend and I was heading back over to our place to get some more stuff. And I'm watching the traffic. I'm at a red light and I need to turn right. And I'm so focused on the traffic and stuff. And I start going, and all of a sudden, here comes this guy on this flipping bike coming up to the intersection. And I mean, he's cruising and he has no brakes on his bike. He's putting his feet down and his feet are sliding on the sidewalk, you know, and I'm like, oh my gosh, do I go? Because he could run right into the side of my truck. And luckily,
Yeah.
no one was coming. So I hurry him, pulled out of the way, and I hear him call me a shithead. You know, that was eating me up for a little bit because I think, oh my gosh, I didn't see this guy. I felt so bad because I didn't see him. He could have got hurt, you know, and his emotions are going too. I'm sure his heart probably just kicked in 3 times the beats. And it took me probably an hour and a half to finally let that go. I had
Yeah.
to tell myself, Al, you didn't see him, right? You didn't notice him. It's okay. No one got hurt. Everything's okay. Yes, he called you a shithead. That was just his expression of shaking his feathers, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So just don't stay there. Feel him and move on.
Yeah, I want to touch upon a lot of the work I studies by Dr. David R. Hawkins, and the reason I bring that up is he created a scale of emotions using a logarithmic scale, which actually measures the vibration of earthquakes, right? And so, using kinesiology, muscle testing, he was able to create this scale based on each emotion. And what it does is it measures the energetic frequency to each emotion. And why is that important? Right? Because we're energetic beings. And the way in which I can prove this to your audience is, I could die right now. I'm going to weigh the same amount. So what's keeping us alive, right? So we're energy. That's proven. That's science. So now break it down to emotions. So shame and guilt, fear, those are all highly, like, very, very low frequency emotions, right? Really, really low. So low that it's close to death. That's why, if you think about it, people who operate in persistent chronic shame, guilt, fear, what do they have? They're on 950 mental health drugs. They have chronic physical health diseases. They present with cancers. They present with Crohn's, autoimmune diseases. And the reason why is from a purely energetic perspective. They are steeped in these emotions that are killing them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I use that with a lot of clients because it's so hard for people to let go of belief systems, paradigms, and you know, stories that they've been brought up with, right? So you have to work a 9 to 5 and pay your taxes and have a house, have 2 kids, a dog, and to be successful. A lot of people still cling to that story, right? But so when I tell them, okay, but where are you happy? Do you feel joy? Like, and no, what do they tell me? They're stressed, they're anxious, right? Why is that? Because they feel fear. Why do you feel fear? Well, because you're not, you're striving to meet the expectations that you think you have to meet. And so when you have this scientific tool to say, okay, well, these feelings are basically killing you. So sure, you're gonna get the house, you're gonna get the kids, you're gonna get the dog, but you're not gonna make it past 60. You're not gonna make it past 70. And even if you do, you're probably not gonna live an optimal life because your physical health isn't gonna be where it needs to be. Your mental health is most certainly not where it needs to be. Then they start to, okay, again, it's that little bit of information that keeps them curious. It's not gonna fix their life right away, but it's like every time they go to that, oh, I'm such a shit for missing that guy on the bike, you're like, wait a minute, there's proof that if I keep beating myself up about this, then I'm actually causing harm to my body. So can I let that go? And then again, getting curious, why is it I'm beating myself up about this again? And inherently, most people that I run into have some beliefs that they cling to that make them believe they're bad, right? So I'll give you a really good example. As a mother, working to achieve success in corporate world, I felt like I was a terrible mother because I wasn't present for my kids in the meaningful way that women are supposed to be present, right? And so it really took me having to re-examine that belief of what is a mother? How do I want to show up for my children? What is the ultimate outcome? Is it being home baking cookies every day so that I'm there? Or is it my children feeling so comfortable with me, they call me up when they're at a party and drink too much because they know I'm going to come get them and make sure they're safe? So it's really being able to examine what feels really good for you and being okay with that, because what feels good for you, Al, is not necessarily what's going to be okay for me, and that's okay. It's not meant to. But if I'm happy and I don't judge myself, then I'm okay. I had boobs on my arm and I would show up at the kids' school all the time, and you'd have all these people in an uproar because, and I'm like, well, you know what? This is a symbol of empowerment for me. You don't have to like it, and I'm not here to tell you what should feel comfortable for you. But if I'm okay with it, then I'm okay with it. And I hope that for you, you find what feels good for you and you're okay with, and you chase that, even if
Yeah.
nobody else understands, because they're not meant to.
No, amen. I agree with that 100%. 100%. And again, it's that journey, right? We've talked about it throughout the show, taking those baby steps. It's that journey, and I've read Dr. Hawkins' book. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's yellow and white one.
Oh, you read Letting Go.
Letting
Letting
Go.
Go. That's
Letting
a
Go.
great book for people in recovery.
Yes.
Great book.
Really, really good book. And also a good one is Conscious Creator. And I don't remember the
Yeah.
gentleman who wrote it, but that book, when I read it, helped me in my journey. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I started paying attention to my thoughts. And I realized, and it took me some time. I probably could have been a month and a half, if not longer. I don't know. I started realizing the majority of my thoughts were negative thoughts.
Yeah.
And when I recognized that, it took time to slowly do it, right? Because we're plugged into a certain neuron, and I finally had to start working on it to where I finally unplugged that sucker and plugged it into something more positive, to where I'm going,
Yes.
okay, wait a minute. I don't want to think this. It doesn't benefit my life. Let's think this, right? And our subconscious mind, it constantly plugs those neurons into a crappy plug or outlet, right? Because that's how our subconscious mind works. However, the more that you start recognizing it, the better things get. And it seems like the happier you become. And it works magic. You don't have to really do anything physically, or just pay attention. We
Yeah.
pay attention every day, right? When you get in your vehicle, you pay attention where the traffic's coming from so you don't get in an accident, right?
Yep.
When you're cooking dinner, you're paying attention so you don't spill or you don't burn yourself. It's that simple. Just start paying attention to what your mind is telling you, and you'll be surprised where things will start leading.
And here's the test for anybody in the audience who wants to try it. Think about a car. Pick a car that you see, right? Boom, you see a car, now you're driving. I guarantee you that because you saw that car, you're going to see 7 cars just like that without even looking. because your brain is actively seeking what it thinks about. And that's why I tell people, again, I believe in energy. So going kind of off topic, but it is related. I am a huge manifester. I can manifest. So if I think about a hawk, I know that at some point in my experience, whether I'm going for a walk or whatever, I'll see a hawk, right? But the reason why is because I have rewired my brain just the same way as you talk about, is first off just being mindful of your thoughts. Just me, you don't have to do anything. But I do this a lot with my clients. I say, I want you to spend a week, and just each time you catch yourself telling yourself you're stupid, or you shouldn't have done that,
Right.
or that was dumb, or I look like shit, whatever. Just as many times, and you're gonna miss more often than you won't, but check off how many times. You're gonna be amazed at how often you put yourself down. And just that awareness alone is the opening to experiencing life differently. Because even if you catch one thought in a span of a week, that's one thought that you turned around into a positive thought. You reframed it and was able to say, no, this doesn't serve me. And the compass that I tell people to follow is this: if you feel good, you're thinking good thoughts. If you feel anxious, depressed, shitty, you're thinking negatively. As soon as you think negatively, shift. So even if it's, anything, it can be anything. I'm shitty mom because I yelled at my daughter, right? That feels crappy. Or I could be like, wow, I am here all the time showing up for my daughter, and I need to take care of myself. So I'm going to go relax. And I'm not a shitty mom. I'm human, right? That's a much different way of thinking. I recognize I didn't show up the way I wanted to, but I didn't beat myself down. I figured out why it was I reacted that way, and then took action, right? Okay, I'm obviously stressed. I need to take care of myself. I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to go journal, or I'm going to do something kind to myself, so that way I can reset and be more present and kind to other people.
Yeah. And for our listeners, Kerri, you just made it sound so flippin' easy, and it is. I mean, seriously, it is. And the reason why I say that, I went to an event, oh my gosh, I would say probably 8 or 9 years ago, when I kind of just starting a quarter of the way into my journey, or not even a quarter of the way. And the teacher of the class had us all get up, move our chairs, and we all got in this big circle. There were probably 30, 40 people in this class. And she shut off the lights, and you can still see individuals, it's not pitch black. And she goes, we're going to do an exercise. And this is how I'm going to teach you how quick you can change your thoughts. I want you to look down and draw an imaginary circle on the floor in front of you. When I count to 3 and hit 3, I want you to close your eyes, step into that circle, and I want you to think of something that really ticks you off. So we go through the process. We're in that, I don't know, circle for a minute or so. She goes, okay, open your eyes, step back, look around the room. And you're looking around the room, and you can see people that were gritting their teeth. You can see people who had their fists doubled up. I was one that had my fists doubled up, right?
Yeah.
I could feel the anxiousness that was inside me. You could see it in the room. She goes, now we're going to do the exact same exercise, but this time when I count to 3, close your eyes and step inside the circle. And I want you to think of something that makes you happy. We went through that whole doggone process again. By the time it was done, we stepped back out, opened our eyes. You looked around the room. Some people were crying, but with smiles on their face, right? I was
Yep.
one that had tears in my eyes, because I had just not too long ago had a granddaughter that was probably 2 or 3 at the time. She was just the joy of my life. And the teacher goes, that's how quick you can change. We're talking about shame and guilt. We're talking
Yep.
about allow your emotions to happen, feel your emotions, step the hell out of that circle, step into another circle of something that makes you feel good. right?
Yep.
And we're not talking go buy something because that makes you feel good. That's going back into the addiction thing, right? Feel your emotions, feel what's happening, feel your body. Because you said it earlier, Kerri, our body tells us things before things actually happen, right? Because that's how our bodies are built. Again, we are based off of energy. Everything emits energy. My water cup right here's got energy in it, you know. This plastic fruit right here has energy in it, you know, and it's emitting.
Yeah.
And however, it'll pick up whatever energy is in the room and
Yep.
emit that energy. So, guys, it really is that simple. Now, it's not going to happen overnight, even though it's simple, because we have been programmed for so long to fall into that trap, right? And
Yep.
it's not our mistake. It's nothing we did wrong. It's just how how life takes us. However, you're starting to see more individuals like Kerri and so many other people who are out there helping other individuals start recognizing their true selves.
Yep.
You know, I went to an event at a recovery place. It was Second Chance. They had a panel there with people, and I was talking to one of the gentlemen who has been on my show, and he works at this recovery place, the Other Side Academy, downtown Salt Lake. And he goes, Al, you know, one of the coolest things about working here and seeing people go through their recovery journey is they make it past the 12, 13-month mark. And all of a sudden they start realizing they have talents they had no clue that they had. And he goes, it is so neat to see, you know, it's like a little kid that made its first little bowl out of clay.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, seriously, it's like, look what I did, right? Look what I can do. And he says, Al, it is one of the most coolest things you can fricking see. Somebody coming out of their shell and realizing who they are as individuals. And again, this is 12, 13, 14 months down the road. It's that process. We all have it in us.
Well,
So
I mean, first off, we're all creative beings anyway, and that actually made me think of the book by Julia Cameron, I believe it's called. It's called The Artist's Way, and it's very famous because um there's there's successful writers who talk about this book, and I believe it's a 3 month, so it's like a program in a book, but it's created to bring out the creativity in everybody. And really, it's a self-help book in that we have been programmed to think logically and not with our heart. When you tap into your heart, you can create anything. I'm 43. I do pottery. I'm learning piano. But it's because I'm not so hyper focused on being judged anymore, being critical, that I can get to play and experience life, right? And that's another reason why guilt and shame don't serve you. So if I go outside and dance and look like a complete fool, I don't care. I'm having fun. But if you're seeped in, oh my God, I'm going to look horrible, people going to judge me, then you feel all this shame and stuff, you're never going to be fully expressive. And that's really important for me to drill into people, is that you have so many untapped gifts and so much untapped potential and so much untapped wisdom. Really, truly, there's nothing that I tell people that they don't intrinsically know on a soul level, on an intuitive level. It's just that we have been conditioned so deeply by the expectations of society. And very much like you said, it's not our fault. It is just the collective consciousness of energy is fear-based. That's it. Simple as that. So each time you catch yourself thinking that, don't judge, just be like, oh, I'm operating out of habit. And that's simply the truth. It really is the truth. And then shift it and make a choice. And as you do that, you start to learn and discover all of these amazing gifts that you have. And you really tap into, the beauty that you're meant to be, because we are all here to be of service to people in some way, shape, or form, whether it's to create beautiful music that moves us, or whether it's to create beautiful architect that inspires us, whatever the case is. But you'll never be able to become that full expression and tap into that passion if you're seeped in guilt and shame. and if you're leaning into addiction and addictive behaviors. And so I really encourage people always just start to get curious about what feels good for you. And at the end of the day, I tell my daughters all the time, I have two teenagers. I don't have to understand your choices. I don't, right? In this day and age, there's so many people who identify as with all these things, and I don't have to understand them. But if you can look at me in my eyes and tell me that you're happy, that you feel fulfilled, that you're satisfied, you're at peace, I'm good with it. I don't care. You want to be purple today? Be purple, right? Because my job's not to understand. My job is to love you unconditionally. And the only way you will get there is if you love yourself unconditionally.
Yeah,
And really, that's at the end of the day, that's truth.
that is true. That is true. And again, we cannot do it alone, right, Kerri? You
No.
said that quite a few times during the show. We cannot do it alone. It's like those that's in their journey of recovery. Any of us, I guess, self-care even, right? If it's something you're not used to, there are people like Kerri that's out there that has gone through it themselves, and those are the type of people you want to surround yourself, right? Because it's like me when my wife was in the depths of her addiction. I'm doing my best to help her with the addiction. However, I didn't understand a damn thing about addiction.
Yeah.
So if you work with somebody that understands what you're going through, those are the people that you want to reach out to, like Kerri, right? Because she's lived it. She's gone through it. She knows the journey. She's stumbled. She's fell in the potholes. She's tripped over branches, and she's got her scrapes and bruises. She learned what it took to get to the other side of the mountain, to go down another hill and stumble and fall just to get right back up and get to the other side of the mountain. So we all need that help because we cannot do it alone. And guys, look at it
Yeah.
this way. There are professional athletes out there who have worked their butts off to live their dream, right? To live their dream, or professional coaches. I mean, I'm working my butt off to live my dream, and that's continuously to grow this podcast, continuously to grow my speaking career. However, even those that are making millions and millions of dollars have someone next to them to help them
Yep.
in that journey. They're not doing it by themselves. They're putting the work in, but they have somebody putting the yellow brick road in front of them, right? Just keep following this path and we'll get you there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's it, is we are all hardwired for connection. I think it's the attorney general or anyway, they just said that the biggest epidemic right now is loneliness in America. And you see people are steeped in anxiety and fear. And so I reach out to everybody I can at any point, and just a smile, just a kind word, because I do know inherently that people are struggling. And just like you said, the more you're in touch with your own energy, you can read people's energy. So I immediately know. I can walk into a room and I can generally pick out who struggles with anxiety, who's confident, who appears confident but really operates from fear because they're coming off so prideful, right? All of that energy you can read. And so now when it comes to most people still, I guess on top of shame and guilt, the biggest thing that people have to realize is reaching out and asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness. So I
Yes.
have a 10th grade education, right? I finished 10th grade in high school, and I made it all the way up to CEO of a corporation in corporate America before I went into business for myself. I didn't do that because I was gung-ho and prideful. I did it because on some level, no matter where I was in my struggle with addiction, I had enough humility to know if I wanted to grow, I needed help. Always. And so it is incredibly important. I also think collaboration is so important. We get so stuck in, I want to be the best, but our ideas are individually not as great as a collective idea working for the common goal. That's why I love to meet other people who work in addiction, other people who are coaches, other people who are working in the energy, because I know a fraction, like a microcosm of what is out there. And if I can immerse myself with people who are operating in the arena that I want to be in, right? So a higher level of energy, I know I can't help but grow and expand. And that also goes for know your surroundings. I understand that change is very difficult. But if you live with people who struggle with addiction, it's going to be harder for you to get sober. If you live in an environment where you're constantly being berated, that there's a lot of emotional and physical abuse, it's very, very difficult to break free from that energy, because you generally are the sum total of the 5 people you are around. So for me, I love to grow and expand. And so I outgrow people fast. And a lot of people like, that's mean. It's not mean. I love you, but if you're not helping me grow and expand, then I can love you, but I'm gonna continue to grow and expand. And I know the universe is gonna provide me with people who are gonna help me do that. It's not that I feel any differently towards you, it's that I outgrow you. And most people, right, we say in marriages don't serve us because we've changed, but the other person hasn't. So we're fighting this contention. Or we stay at a job that we've outgrown, that we have capped our limit of learning. And yet, because there's this pretense of security, or this idea that we have to remain loyal, or we're selfish because we want more for ourselves, we stay. And guess what? That creates suffering. That's going to make it harder for you to grow and expand, to feel joy, peace, and harmony, because you're fighting your internal narrative that you need more. And again, in the beginning of this podcast, I said, I truly believe we're meant to grow and expand. We're meant to grow and expand constantly. And if we are too afraid to step out of what it is we know for fear of the unknown, then what we're really doing is we're not allowing ourselves to grow and become the best. You know what? I don't even want to say the best. The version of yourself that you wake up and love every day. And for me, who I was yesterday is not who I am today. And I will be pissed off if 2 years from now, I'm the same person as I am today, because that's not what I'm meant for. And I won't play small because some people think that, I'm selfish for wanting to grow.
That's not selfish. Yeah, and I agree with you on 100% on that too, because I mean, I am not the same person I was 14 years ago, and I was not the same person I was yesterday. Because
Yeah.
really, throughout the day, not all day, because I've got to focus on other things like my work and things like that. However, I do my best to have those thoughts come up, going, okay, what can I improve on? You
Yeah.
know, I mean, I did it with the job that I have now. I have this job that I do, I manage my brother's concrete business, and I'm doing this home remodeling stuff. And I, I'm grateful that I have it, but it's like I don't want to do this. I want to do my show. I want to figure out how I can make a living doing my show and be in a studio all day long. And I realized it took me probably about 5 months, seriously, 5 or 6 months. And I realized I'm making my life a living hell because I'm going to a place I don't want to be, instead of accepting what it was. Now I accept it. I accept this is where I'm at today. This is what I'm doing. My day goes a lot better because I know in my head, I see where I'm going. I know where I'm going with all this stuff that I'm working on, and I'm excited. I am constantly excited, going, oh my gosh, what kind of phone call am I going to get today? What kind of email am I going to get today? Because it could be my next step, right? Even though it's
Yep.
only one step. Again, we don't have to take a whole flight of stairs all at once. And now my days are a lot better because of it,
Yeah.
because of changing my thoughts. I don't know if you can hear the
Well,
cat.
I love cats. My cat's amazing. Anyway, so to that point, when I left my career, my husband, my house, my assets, all my financial security, all in one shot. 2 reasons. One, I had worked my way up to this place where I truly believed if you leap, the net will appear, and it will. And 2, I heard, and I don't know if it was Denzel Washington or Will Smith or whoever, But I think it was Denzel, and he said, when I was growing up, people always said, you always had a backup plan. You always have to have a backup plan because what if the first thing you want to do fails? And he said, I never got that because if I'm going to fail, I want to fail forward into the thing that I'm chasing. And I truly believe that, going into business for myself, having left all my assets, all my security, everything, um, was the scariest thing. But I trusted that the universe was going to care for me, which it had, and provide for me. And that even if I failed, I'd feel forward into what it is that I am meant to be. And so that's what I did. Now, that took me a long time to get to a place where I was brave enough to say, you know what, I trust that net's going to appear. And the way I did it was exactly what you just said. It's taking small incremental steps and recognizing that next opportunity is going to show up. I don't have to figure it out, right? If I figure it out, that's logic, and that's creating resistance because now I'm creating this expectation that it needs to be a certain way. Nothing has to be a certain way. I don't have to be a certain coach. I have zero accreditation to my name. And for that reason, that's why I went into addiction recovery, because doors kept getting shut in my face about wanting to help people with addiction. And I said, fine, you don't want to hire me, I'll do it myself. And I did, right? Because again, I trusted that the universe, God, whatever it is you believe, that my faith in myself was enough to get me where I wanted to go. And it is. Right? Because
Yeah.
you live in what, Utah? I live in Connecticut. What are the chances that you and me would be having this conversation if I didn't believe that there was some force, whatever that is connecting those dots? And that's what it is. And the more you're open to receiving, the less control you have to have, because to your point, we're in flow. Right.
Yeah.
Just before the show, he started recording. He said, let's just see where it flows. And that's it. It's where do you flow? And anytime that you feel like you have to be in control, or that you feel resistance, tightness, ask yourself, can I let this go? Can I surrender my expectation and be okay with whatever transpires, whatever happens? And 100% of the time, even if you don't understand it in that moment, it's exactly what you needed to continue your path to where you want to be.
Amen. Amen. And that is so well put. And before we end this show, I mean, we've gone over an hour already. It goes by so flipping fast.
It does.
You know, I just want to share with you, Kerri, and our listeners, cost here everywhere, all around the United States has just skyrocketed. And our rent has almost doubled just here in the past 4 years.
Wow.
Especially here the last 2 years, it's just gone. They've raised it $500 every year, right? And it got to a point to where that's just too much for our finances that are coming in. And my wife and I chose that we went and bought a trailer, a camping trailer, a 32-foot trailer. And I'm very grateful I had a place to park it. And we're in a backyard, pull it up there, and we're living in a flipping camping trailer. We moved in full time this past Sunday. I tell you what a change, right? You're so used. I'm still getting used to because I had a routine every morning. Now my routine's broken, and I'm working now on rebuilding this new routine in the mornings, what I have to do, because all my stuff isn't where it used to be, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's still stuff is still in a box because we have nowhere to put it because we're in a trailer.
Yep.
And somebody asked me the other day what it's like if they think my wife and I can handle it. And I'm like, look, we talked about it pretty heavy. We're like, this is where our life's taking us right now, because it's not always going to be this way. That's how we have to look at it. We're not stuck here forever. This is just our next step that we have to do. And again, it's also something we're learning, and it's putting us in a very, very closed place together. We're both still growing, right? She's 32 months in her sobriety. She's growing. I'm 14 years. in my journey and growing still, we know we're going to go exactly where we need to go. And we're not looking at it as a failure. We have a roof over our heads, which a lot of people don't have. And I hit 60 on the 15th of July. And someone was asking me about being 60. And I said, you know what? I am so freaking grateful and so blessed to be turning 60, because I have met a lot of people in my life who never made it this far. And I bet
Yep.
they wish they were in my shoes. Right. So again, it's how do we look at our lives? We can change. You're never too old. And it took me till I was in my mid 50s before I found my why. And what's crazy, kind of like with what your journey's been, Kerri, it was all due to my wife's addiction that put me on this path where I went, oh my hell, I know what I want to do with my life for once. I know the direction I want to take it, right? So again, it's never too late, ever.
Nope, never.
I mean, Colonel
Ne-
Sanders, who did Kentucky Fried Chicken, he didn't become a millionaire till he was 65, right?
My 85-year-old neighbor lost his wife last year. I happened to randomly walk over there. I didn't know this man from Adam, but we started shooting the craft. He and I now are learning pottery together. He's 85. So that speaks to, and I actually did, I wrote about that on my Facebook page. But that's exactly it. And the other thing, I really want to commend you and your wife for being brave enough to trust in the fact that the unit, it will work out. You know, my children were used to having the best clothes. They had a car, they had access to vacations, they had everything. And when I disrupted our whole life, they went to having to wait a couple years at times for new clothes and stuff. And what I see is my children and I have such a deep seated appreciation for the most important things in life now. And what is that? That's communion, connection with the earth, having deep conversations, being able to hand make a Christmas present. And so, and sure, there, you know, because I rode the courses, money coming in, and they have access to things that they gave up. But it created this appreciation that I think that most people don't necessarily have, because we have had access to everything. And then also it just is going to instill a deeper level of trust in your intuition. And I know you're wrapping up, and what I will leave people with is, you know, a lot of what I talk about is speaking your authentic truth. And what does that mean? It means being true to yourself, speaking the truth to yourself. Are you unhappy? And if you are, make a change, because no matter how fearful you are about it, the other side of being truthful is freedom from being trapped, confined, and suffering, freedom from suffering.
Amen. I mean, that's perfect. I was just getting ready to ask you, what would you like our audience to gain from the show? And you touched on it just right there.
Yeah.
Kerri, I know you work with people all over, right? Just not in Connecticut. How
Yep.
can people find you if they are interested in chatting with you? How could they hunt you down?
So I have a website, kerrilewis.coach. They can find me. I have a YouTube channel, believe it's Kerri Lewis Coaching, and also on Facebook as well. And I have a newsletter. But honestly, email me at LOVE at kerrilewis.coach. And I'm happy to have a FaceTime phone call with anybody. I have my phone number right on my website. I love unexpected calls. And really, I love good conversation. So whether you're calling, you know, with a question, or whether you just want to say hi, I love people, and I love what I do.
I love it. So, you're okay with me when, with the caption when this show comes out, for me to put that information in the caption so people can get on?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
I will make sure that's there. Kerri, it has been a flippin' absolute pleasure and an honor to be with you today.
Likewise.
thank you for your time. And I know you and I will probably end up staying in contact. We've built a bond already, I believe, from our first conversation
Yeah, there's no
that we had.
probably about it. I'm that itch that you can't scratch. Once I'm in your life, I don't go away.
We'll say a permanent rash. No, but that's kind of a bad way of
Yeah.
saying it. I love it. I love it. Well, Kerri, thank you again for your time. And listeners, man, thank you so much to all our listeners. None of this would be possible without you guys. You guys are helping us grow, just like all our amazing guests that come on the show. You're helping us grow. Our guest co-hosts when we have had them, all our sponsors, again, and none of this would be possible if it wasn't for you guys. You know, a lot of times people ask me, well, how's the show going to go, and what's the show about? And I'm like, well, whatever you want the show to be about. And that's what I tell my guests all the time. I just have a platform. It's
Yep.
really their show. It's their chance to say what they need to say, use their voice however it is that they want to use it. And, that's why it's raw. That's why we just go with the flow, because I want people to be heard. And that's why we don't have a time frame. That's why a lot of our shows go well over an hour, because it goes the way it needs to go and things need to be heard. And if it takes over an hour, so be it. So let it be. So again, thank you everyone for all your love and support. And remember this: addiction is giving up everything for one thing, and recovery is giving up one thing for everything. We're out.